Toronto Star. I'm Raju Mudhar, and this matters. There is no business like show business. And thanks to COVID-19, there has been no show business.
Film festivals and premieres are getting rescheduled and canceled right and left. And between quarantine shooting locations, contaminated cast and crew members, and concerns about crowds attending new movies, a lot of projects have ground to a screeching halt in the face of COVID-19.
It's an extraordinary time for film and television production, and essentially there's over £1 billion worth of production currently sitting mothballed around the UK.
Just like most of the rest of society, film and television production around the world were shut down in mid-March. As jurisdictions reopen, some high-profile projects like the next Batman film in the UK and Avatar 2 in New Zealand are getting back going. In Canada, provinces including BC, Manitoba, Ontario, and Quebec are easing restrictions to get the cameras rolling. Although, according to a recent Canadian press article, many new projects are having trouble finding insurance in case the pandemic shuts things down once again. But for those that can get rolling, what will it be like on those sets? How do you shoot a fight scene now? Or a love scene? How do you keep people safe on set and make the stories we want to see? These are the things that are on the mind of Emily Andras, who is the creator, executive producer, and showrunner of Wynonna Earp, which is a supernatural horror western show which airs on CTV Sci-Fi in Canada, Sci-Fi in the US, and is also on Netflix. The show was shooting its 4th season in Calgary, and then the pandemic hit. We've asked her to join us today to talk about television and film production and how it comes back. Emily, thank you so much for being with us.
Oh, thanks for having me, Raju. I have time. Good news.
Emily, I want to get into a broader discussion about television and film production, but I want to talk about your show a little bit. I know what it is, but can you tell us a little bit about what exactly Wynonna Earp is?
Sure. It's a show that has the hardest elevator pitch in the entire world, which is, if I was asked to describe it in a sentence, I probably couldn't. Basically, the premise is Wynonna Earp is the descendant of kind of American gunslinger legend Wyatt Earp. And she very reluctantly finds out that she has inherited this curse where she has to kill sort of his Old West enemies who rise from the grave as demons again and again and again.
Some kids inherit money. Others get talent. Me? I got a demon-killing gun.
But of course, she's kind of a mess. She's kind of an anti-hero. She was never supposed to be the person who kind of took on this mantle. It was supposed to be her sister who disappeared. So it's really about a woman kind of having to do the right thing, battle the supernatural, and figure out she can't do it alone. It's kind of like taking a Western, putting it through the Buffy the Vampire Slayer, a meat grinder, and then sort of taking those traditional Western tropes and kind of really throwing them out the window and kind of including more like diversity and LGBTQ themes.
Dream for that.
No, I get it. You're a lesbian, not a unicorn, right?
And women and stuff like that. And it's a hootenanny. We kind of describe it as a Justified meets Frozen because it's about two sisters. So good luck figuring out what that looks like, but it's definitely worth your time. It's not crazy.
It's a great show. It has an incredibly devoted audience that already hosts and attends conventions about it. And it's an important show too, because it's won awards and been praised for its depictions of LGBTQ relationships. But I actually want to get into some TV lingo here. Everyone sees the credits on a show, and you see a ton of executive producers and producers. Can you tell us what a showrunner does?
So executive producers on a show, to begin with, are usually the head honchos. They include the people from the studio who have put up the money to make the show, who maybe have the most say. But the showrunner is essentially just a fancy term for the head writer who has become a producer. So I started out as just a staff writer in television. So I just wrote the scripts, essentially. But eventually people seemed to like what I was putting out there. I was given the chance to take this comic book, Wynonna Earp, and turn it into a television show. And along with that, I was dubbed showrunner. So what that means is I almost moved from like a staff position to a management position. So I used to be just a writer making the boxes on the factory floor. And now I'm kind of the person who manages everybody else making the boxes, as well as I'm kind of the last stop in all the creative decisions. So everything from casting to wardrobe to tone to art department, all that stuff, the buck kind of stops with me. And it's a very enviable position. I absolutely love my job. I feel very grateful that I get to do it on this show and that I have such an incredible team to back me up, make me look good.
But it's all on you.
But it's all on me, baby. Yeah, exactly. I heard once the thing about being a showrunner is one of the first lessons you learn is that you will not be responsible for all the mistakes, but you will damn well be responsible for fixing it and putting out all the fires. And that's really my job, is just to make it run as clearly as possible and manage people. And, you know, the buck stops with me. So that's how she goes.
So Wynonna Earp shoots in Calgary. You have an incredibly tight-knit cast. I know it's probably the exact same with the crew. There was some turmoil that we might get into that put this season in jeopardy, but you guys came back. Your dedicated fan base was super happy. You started shooting. All of a sudden, COVID-19 becomes a thing. When did it start to sort of rear its ugly head to you? And then when did you guys decide that you had to stop production?
Right. Great question. So yeah, without getting too into it, unless you want me to down the line, Wynonna Earp has had a really kind of, I can say, interesting and exciting history now, but it's been quite fraught. We've been on the air for 3 years. We've had things happen. Like at first we were really a cult show, just struggling to survive and kind of get an audience. Then in second season, our incredible lead, Melanie Scrofano, became pregnant.
Dude, it's been 12 minutes or less since your last contraction. You're dilating.
You read the books.
The Wikipedia.
So we had to quickly write that into the show. And she basically did the entire thing as an ass-kicking demon hunter, pregnant, 9 months, freezing cold, February in the middle of Alberta, and then gave birth 4 days after our last shooting day of season 2. Incredible. Season 3, we got renewed finally at San Diego Comic-Con by both of our networks for not only season 4, but season 5, which was like just a huge gift. And then something happened which I'd never heard of before, which is despite the fact that the customer had basically ordered more product, meaning the network, IDW, which is our comic book company that kind of serves as our studio, basically ran into some financial trouble. So basically said, we can't make the show. So we were off the air for a year where our fans, who are called the Earpers, did this incredible thing. They just rallied. Their whole brand as a fandom is kind of like polite, no chill, is what they say. So they bought billboards in Times Square. They did letter writing campaigns. They kind of poured over financial documents. It was quite extraordinary to behold. And basically, come the fall of 2019, we were back at it. The writer's room had reconvened. We were thrilled. Season 4 was a go. We all got to Calgary in January and started filming January 2020. And, you know, it's so funny to look back. I'm sure as for all of us looking back on January, certainly we were hearing percolations about what was happening in China, in particular, in parts of Asia, as per this new coronavirus. But it seemed something very abstract. There was a lot of news about, is this basically just a bad flu? Is it a bad cold? I think we started to get nervous as we filmed kind of end of February. We filmed 6 episodes, and then we were coming up to a hiatus that basically started around March 8th. And I remember one of our beloved cast members, whose name is Tim Rozon.
I really need to start drinking less. Much more.
He had just had a new baby and his wife was in Florida. So he was going to fly for hiatus. And just so you know, hiatus is a fancy word in television production for we're all going to take a week off and catch up a little bit. Anyway, he was going to try to fly from Calgary to Florida. And I remember that around that time, he was told by the government that if he flew to Florida, he would then have to go into quarantine when he came back for production for 2 full weeks. So for him, I think he was a little bit ahead of the curve as per like, guys, I don't really know if we're only going to be asked for a week. And over that break, over that hiatus, you know, it was March break here in Toronto. I live in Toronto, just so you know, I go back and forth. I'm from Calgary originally. I have 2 kids. We had planned to go away for March break. You know, I remember how, as I'm sure you all do listening to this podcast, maybe around March 13th or so, I remember how quickly things changed. We canceled our plans. They shut down the border. And I have to be honest, I was quite relieved when Alberta declared a state of emergency, because that basically gave us the tools we needed legally to be able to shut down the show without losing money. Do you know what I mean? Like, the truth is we needed force majeure, so to speak, to be able to say, well, we can't keep paying people. We can't keep paying for these sets. We can't keep paying for the studio. We need a legal reason to shut down the show. So as of March 13th, we were down. And like everyone else in the world, now we're just kind of tracking it week by week, trying to decide not only when we will come back, but what production is going to look like when we do come back after COVID.
That's exactly what I want to talk to you about. And it's really interesting because I believe Britain is just opening up very soon, or they come up with the regulations. Manitoba opened up June 1. Other jurisdictions are starting to get this up and going, and it's on their plans or their phases. I believe Alberta has part of their phase 3 of their plan, but there are no dates. First off, what are you hearing about coming back? And also, what kind of precautions are you going to have to take?
Great question. I'm hearing all sorts of crazy things. It's funny dealing with this because I feel like the truth is very few people have insider information. I think we are all privy to the same press conferences by the government. I think the government is very cautiously trying to weigh things day by day. Everybody is pretty loath to give specific dates, right? I think it's very interesting with Canada as per the states as well, because the truth is, as you said, it's regionally different, right? Manitoba, as you've said, is opened up film production on June 1st. They had much fewer cases than a lot of places versus Ontario, where I live and where all the cast lives, obviously struggling a little bit more. Alberta has done okay. They are very much on it. I think they've done well. I would presume and hope that if things go according to plan, we would be back in production in the summer. That's all I can say. But as for how it looks, I don't know. I think the thing about a film set, Raju, is honestly, it's like at least 100 to 400 people in an enclosed space on any day filming, right? The other nature of television, and particularly a show like Wynonna Earp, is there's tons of close contact. It almost can be equivocal to sports, to a basketball game, right? There's stunts, there's fighting, there's smooching, there's sex, there's intimacy. These are all things that are going to have to be put under consideration when we go back into production. We have things like we might have a party scene, where someone is throwing a huge demon party in, a mansion. How many extras can we have? Do they all have to be vetted? It's going to be very interesting to see how this works. Certainly things we're thinking about, is, okay, testing. Let's say we test everybody at the beginning. Are we testing them once a day? If there's 200 crew members, how long does that take? Does that take 2 hours of every day? I have a 12-hour shoot day. If 2 hours of that day is dedicated to testing, does that eat into my production time? And what does that mean for the stories and the amount of footage I'm allowed to get? Other things. What if someone does get sick on set? Do we put everyone into quarantine for 2 weeks? Do we shut down production again? Which could be a killer for the show, right? It's expensive to shut things down again, to turn everything off and then get going again. So I certainly think we don't want to rush, but it would be foolhardy to suggest that the nature of a film set or a television set is anything but close quarters. It is. It's a very intimate environment, much like a factory. And these are all things that we are kind of considering day to day as we go back. And we'll be working in tandem with the government and regulations to see how the hell we can do it.
One of the things that I remembered is there's an old TV joke where you have a network standards person who's on set, who's always like, no, you can't do that because it's too risque, or,
You can show shy side breast, but not front breast. Exactly. Yes. Very
Right.
specific notes. Very specific notes. Yeah.
So are your networks going to be sending someone, and is it their job to then start enforcing social distancing on a set?
I think it's our job. I think in a weird way, the networks are inherently supportive and have been and will be. And certainly I also want to say, I think they are committed to the show, and financially too. They're going to help us kind of get back up and running. But the truth is, this is a local matter, right? We film in Alberta, so I think the burden of safety falls to the Alberta producers and myself. I think it falls to 724, which is the local production company. I think it falls to the local unions. This is the truth, right? We have Teamsters, we have IATSE, we have ACTRA for the actors. We have multiple different film unions involved. They will have their own kind of rules and regulation that will have to be abided by. I don't know so much if it's going to be the network. Even practically in Canada, maybe the network could send someone, but it's a weird time to be traveling. And also in the States right now, the border is closed. I mean, it's also an issue for us. We have a couple of actors and crew members and obviously the network who are in the States right now, and getting them over the border for a demon hunting cowgirl show, although I may think it is, I don't think qualifies as an essential business. So it might be tricky. I really think it has to be done locally. And we really pride ourselves on Wynonna Earp on being a family. We know each other very well. I think that Alberta has some of the top film crews I've ever worked with in my life. It's a very small community, but they've done things as diverse as not only Wynonna Earp, but Heartland. They did The Revenant, which won the Oscar a few years ago. They've done Fargo. They did Brokeback Mountain. I mean, this is a crew who are small but mighty. Their work ethic is unparalleled. And because it's a small group of people, they really kind of have a no-jerk policy. I feel like they police themselves a little bit. They really want to make sure people who are on the local film crews in Alberta are good people who work hard and kind of understand the values that that community has, which is safety first, doing good work no matter what, taking care of one another, not huge egos in general. But I think it's going to be local. You know, it's interesting with Wynonna Earp being in Alberta. I actually think, I don't want to put this karma out into the universe, I think we have a better chance of going earlier, for example, than a lot of shows that film in Ontario. And those in turn will even go earlier than shows that film in the States. I think that shows that are based in places like North Carolina and California and Louisiana, I would be surprised. And what I'm hearing from fellow showrunners who do work in the States, if those productions go back into business before the fall.
You mentioned you had some American cast members. There's been film lobbyists who've been trying to cut down the 14-day self-isolating orders. It's funny, they're saying maybe sports athletes may be able to get a little ease on that, but that would affect you. For instance, Tim Rozon, if he's coming from Florida, he'd have to isolate for 14 days.
He's in Montreal. He's okay. He's in Montreal enjoying his baby. I'm not sure he didn't start this whole thing just to have time with his baby. Just kidding. Well, you know, it's interesting, too, because I think this speaks to another issue that I feel like is being tossed around with athletics, is like it's the push-pull between business and humanity. I mean, we talk about bringing our cast in, for example, and then do we isolate them? Do we put them into quarantine? And this is certainly an issue we're seeing with, you know, the sports leagues. And there's some athletes who are fighting back on that. People aren't commodities. Maybe they don't want to be in a hotel for 6 months away from their kids and their families, isolated to kind of perform. Do you know what I mean? And I think, again, we have to take into account that people may not want to be in Calgary in a hotel room for 6 months without being able to go home. We have to kind of balance those needs, right? Or we're going to have very unhappy people. You know, we can't kind of just ship everyone off to the Holiday Inn in the middle of the Arctic and kind of make the show. People have to live their lives, and we have to treat them like people. That's how we've succeeded. So as far as the 2-week quarantine, yeah, we even have a director who's out of the country. He's in Hong Kong. We love him, but even when we look down the pipe of scheduling, we have to account for the fact that he needs to be in Calgary for 2 weeks before he even sets foot on set. So the timing of all that and getting everybody out there is going to be really challenging, I think.
I have a sort of a two-part question, and it's, you know, one of the things that I love talking to you about is being a writer, because I know that's sort of everything where it starts from. I think writers' rooms are the one thing that can pretty easily go virtual. So I'm curious if you are taking part in that. And then, but secondarily, for this season, I know obviously your job on set is to immediately write around problems and fix a solution. Are you starting to rewrite the rest of season 4 to try and take into account things like social distancing?
That's a great question. So I'll start with the first part, which is the idea of doing writer's room virtually. So one of the things I loved about being a TV writer is, you can probably tell from this podcast, I love to talk. I'm not your traditional introvert as far as when you think of a writer, kind of writing with their quill in their, you know, attic. I really love people. And one thing that's really fun about TV is the writing is often done by committee. It's a big group of people kind of scurrying to come up with ideas and generate scripts. And I love that energy. I love my writers. So certainly we have started doing some of that via Zoom and whatnot. The funniest thing for me about Zoom is, like, I do think it's not as conducive to a writing room as being together is. There's something really psychological. I don't know if you find this, Raju, about Zoom, where because you can see yourself the whole time you're having a conversation, it's hard to lose yourself entirely. And look, I'm not going to lie to you, like, a lot of writing room is just like sitting around, talking smack, making terrible jokes, trying to make each other laugh as we kind of generate creative ideas, right? So there's a little bit of that spontaneity that is lost. On the other hand, I would say doing sort of virtual writing rooms, I find that it's actually easier to get work done. We're all kind of concentrating on the hours we have. And this too shall become normal. Like, it's funny how quickly we all adjusted, and we're very lucky that we're able to work that way. Have I started working on season 4? Okay, so yes, and this is one thing that kind of keeps me up at night. So obviously Wynonna Earp is a fantasy show. It really is about an unlikely group of people who are forced to become heroes. And I feel that one of the reasons Wynonna Earp as a series has succeeded is because there's so much joy in that concept. I think this is me getting biased about genre television. I think that it is often seen through a lens of being lesser than. There's a real trend, or at least there was maybe a few years ago, when it comes to television criticism, of seeing as only certain things are deemed sort of serious and important when it comes to storytelling. I'm really proud, obviously, of Wynonna Earp, and I think there's real value in writing a show for people who work hard all day, come home, sit on the couch Friday night, crack a beer, and get to cheer and laugh and cry along with people who are heroes. And we see that, there's a reason Marvel movies are so huge. People just want to feel inspired. They want to feel hope. They want to believe in something that's a little different, that's a little elevated. So the truth is, Wynonna Earp is a fantasy series. And look, like, the pandemic and everything else that's happening, frankly, right now in the world is pretty distressing. It will be weird to write the back half of the season maybe not addressing COVID, but I just don't know if I'm the show that's going to have everyone in masks, that's going to have people in isolation. Certainly maybe some of those themes are already present in Wynonna Earp, wink, wink, ironically enough, when you see the first half of season 4, a little bit of an Easter egg there. But I just don't think I necessarily want to talk about COVID in my writing on this show. Do you know what I mean? I think if I am creating another show in 3 years, I think it will be baked into kind of the zeitgeist and where we've all been as a culture. But it's just not going to match the first half of my season. I think that people are going to need escapist TV, and I think I kind of have to stay on the road I'm already on as far as Wynonna. That being said, in the same way, I think when we all watch shows that were filmed 2 minutes ago, I'm just watching The Last Dance on Netflix and being like, oh my God, look at these huge crowds. I mean, it's so crazy how quickly we notice all those things we took for granted, just going to brunch with friends or going to a concert together. I mean, those things kind of do almost take you out of the moment insofar as that's not our reality right now. Practically, more what I'm doing is things like I already spoke about. Like, I just think I need less people on set, to be frank. I think that I need maybe 4 demons will do when I was going to have 15.
There are still 62 remnants out there trying to kill me.
Oh, you did math.
Good news, I'm working on a Canadian budget, so I'm not used to that. But things like party scenes, filming outside is a big thing for us. One thing that's funny about Wynonna Earp is our schedule was basically January to May. We are a show that films in the middle of winter in Alberta. I assume when we come back, it's going to be bikinis instead of parkas, which is amazing. But, that also gives us an opportunity to maybe film more outside. The Alberta landscape is the best character I've ever gotten for free. It's so gorgeous. But just, taking things that maybe would be inside our sets and putting them outside in the yard, putting them outside in the sun, putting them in the shadow of the Rockies. Just practical things like that are going to make a huge difference. So when I'm writing, I'm re-looking at things like that. The thing that I'm not quite sure how to conquer yet is things like testing and tracing.
Well, I think you're right in that we all need something to escape from. It seems like there are a lot of politicians still trying to figure out testing and tracing as well. Emily, this has been really, really fantastic for us. Is there anything that I didn't ask that you think that we should know? I think Wynonna Earp will be back. I mean, you can't kill season 4 with fire. That is not a message to the universe to send fire or a super volcano to Alberta, just PS. But we will be back. We have such a dedicated cast and crew. This too shall pass. And like everyone else, television production will find a way. Just one last thing I'll say too is I think we can all recognize during the pandemic how important content has been. Just think about all the times you've been sitting on your couch consuming music and art and newspapers and stuff like that. And one thing I would love to see come out of the pandemic is just an understanding that arts can keep us alive when we're kind of going through despair. Very self-serving message, but I'd like to say that for my fellow people, my fellow content creators, that now more than ever, people are going to need your stories and whatnot. So get to it. Thank you so much. Thanks for having me, Raju. Emily Andras is the creator, executive producer, and showrunner on Wynonna Earp. That's it for today. Thanks so much for joining us. This Matters is hosted and produced by me, Raju Mudhar, Adrian Chung, and Saba Etisaz. Produced and mixed by Sean Pattenden, and our director of programming is JP Foso. Our show theme music is by So Called, and our episode music is by Mike DeAngelis. We want to hear what stories matter to you. Please send us comments, questions, or ideas to thismatters@thestar.ca. Please consider supporting the journalism the Toronto Star newsroom does at thestar.com. And don't forget to subscribe to This Matters on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. Let's talk soon.